Dum 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 dum.
Dum 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 dum.
I knew you would pick up on that.
So we're live. Hi,
Yeah.
boys and girls.
No, you're not allowed to say that. It's my channel.
Oh, you take everything.
Yeah. I'm just reading the comments now because we were busy. Apparently, take off your blinkers. Oh, for goodness sake.
Yellow Ted says it's girls and boys for goodness sake.
Yes. Good Yellow Ted.
Yeah.
So take off your blinkers. Says busy morning for me. Pim, Bart, and Harry are all in a row as usual.
Yeah, rock on.
As usual.
Awesome. Yes, don't forget to tune in to my live stream, which will be in 2 hours from now.
Yes, minus 1 minute.
Unless this one runs over, in which case you'll all have to wait for me.
I need to go actually before that. So.
Oh yeah, that's true. You're going. Yeah, Pim has to go to work. That sucks on our Sunday morning.
Yeah, sucks ass. But there you go. So I'm guessing that everyone can hear us fine.
Lucas is here.
Yes, he's not out walking with his parents today, apparently.
Good.
We love you, Luke. Hi, Thomas, Daniel, Shell. Patricia says, howdy, howdy, howdy.
Howdy, howdy, hi.
Yeah, okay. So I'll take that as if you can all... Oh, sorry, Luke. Okay, so today I'm doing a lazy live stream. I haven't had to prepare at all. I'm just inviting a new guest because we're doing a lot of guests on this channel right now, and I'm having obviously a very familiar face to most of you anyway, Mr. Bart K, the Nutrition Science Watchdog, and he's going to do whatever I like. I'll stop there.
Yes, he is.
I was like, that sounds good.
Some the villain princess.
Yes, that's never going to happen. So he's going to do what I actually prefer him doing when he's doing this on his own YouTube channel, which is actually diving into the science about something interesting. And today we're going to look at the ketones and pretty much what they are, when they appear, why they appear, whether we need to chase them or not, if are they, what they're good for. And I don't even know what he's going to talk about. Everything ketones.
Oh, so, we're in trouble then.
So
if you don't know what I'm going to say, and I don't know what I'm going to say either, this could be interesting, couldn't it?
Well, Yellow Ted will pick up, I'm sure.
Oh, of course he will. Yes, good.
Yeah.
Sorry, Lucas.
So I'll be keeping an eye on the questions. I'll make sure that all the good questions come up. And unfortunately, we're going to have to finish just before, at least a little bit before 10. So someone can refill his coffee cup and I can be at work at 10 or close to it anyway, which is in 2 hours, by the way. So yes, okay. I'm not banning people by accident today. Well, you never know. What if I go and watch the live stream and keep my phone in my pocket later? We shall see. Bart reporting from the Matrix. Wow, the chat's jumping. This is what I meant to click. The typical crew, awesome crew as usual. Thank you, Daniel. So your notifications are always half an hour late. That is very strange. Just half an hour is strange. He's looking sharp today because he has intelligent things to say for once. Yes, you look snazzy.
Wat van vir dieet snack? Du warens of when das the flicker?
Nope. So here my bad, I guess, bed. I like having sex and all, but you know what's even better than sex knowledge?
Oh yes. Excuse me. Oh yes, Cornell. Quite so. Quite so.
Right. Okay. So do you want to kick off?
Yep. Let's kick it in the guts. And
in the guts.
What I thought I would do, boys and girls, is present for you for a period of time and run through the whole concept of ketogenesis with you all from the ground up. What is it? What are the chemical reactions involved? Why does it occur? What can we infer from that? What have everybody else in the world got wrong about how they've interpreted it? Of course, that kind of thing. I'll run through. I've got about 12 slides. It'll take me as long as it takes me. I think probably a good way to approach this, since we are live, Pim, is that if people have really good questions while I'm speaking on a given topic on a given slide, let's jump in at that stage and let's actually answer questions on the fly rather than waiting, keeping all questions till the end. Keeps everybody involved, keeps people thinking. So sit down, cross your legs, cross your arms, stop throwing those paper darts, and pay attention. Here comes the PowerPoint presentation.
Does it?
Yes, thank you.
I'm in control of the sharing button.
Yes, Pim likes it when she's in control of all the buttons. I can tell you.
Shut the fuck up.
Some development, Princessa.
Right. So shall we get the first slide up then?
I guess that's probably the best place to start. So let's start, shall we, with the very most simple question that most people can't answer when you ask them about ketogenesis. And you will say to somebody, what is the precipitant? What is the trigger? What is that control lever that turns ketogenesis on and off? And what people will generally tell you is that the issue is the level of glucose in the blood. Would that be right, Pim, in your experience? Is that what people generally sort of say? It's the blood sugar controls whether ketones are on or off, yeah?
Well, yes, but you know, I asked you last night, so I'm hoping that you have the answer to that question, which was more related to the insulin than the blood sugar, actually.
Right. Well, we can talk a bit about insulin under questions and stuff at the end.
Yeah.
But let's jump to dealing with that very first point first. It's actually a protein called AMPK, which is adenosine monophosphate kinase. What does that protein do? When that protein experiences a lock and key docking with an adenosine monophosphate molecule, it activates that protein. And then what that protein then does, once it's AMPized, if you like, is that AMP protein complex then goes off and binds to whatever it's supposed to and affects that thing. Is that clear so far? I hope so.
It's clear here.
Good. Awesome. If there are any questions, you know, as I say, just jump in any stage. Now, the thing that a lot of these proteins that are being affected by this AMP kinase, they are enzymes. So what this is a lock and key mechanism that if you think about in houses where there are young children and there are PowerPoints at reachable height for the children and those parents have put plastic plugs in those PowerPoints, think of it that way. So an AMPK blockaded enzyme will not function. It will not precipitate that chemical reaction in the biochemical tree. It turns that tap off. Yeah? So when the cells, the relevant cells in the liver, and your liver is basically the bank of blood glucose and blood fat level. The liver is the controller. Well, your brain controls everything, but the liver is the actual factory, the actual where the workers are that make sure that the level of sugar and fat in the blood are what they should be. Now, when those cells experience an increase in the concentration, when you see square brackets like that around something like it says AMP with square brackets, that means the concentration of, for people that are not familiar with chemical parlance, if you like. So an increase in the liver concentration of adenosine monophosphate leads to the activation of the AMP activated kinase. Cool. The AMP kinase activation leads to a blockade of a number of enzymes, including one called acetyl coenzyme A carboxylase. Okay, it also leads to the activation, that the blocking actually leads to an activation, paradoxically, of another enzyme called malonyl coenzyme A decarboxylase, which is the thing that drives it back the other way. Right. Those things occurring, so you've got a buildup of adenosine monophosphate, AMP, in the liver cells. The enzymes are now blockaded in such a way as to mandate that what now happens is ketogenesis begins. That said, you need to understand that the liver has two gears in terms of fat. There is no neutral gear. There's no I'm doing nothing gear so much. Either your liver is producing ketones, or it is using free fatty acids to build up triacylglycerides, triglycerides, fat for storage. So it's either storing or it's breaking down. It's never sitting still so much. There's kind of a level of hysteresis is the word in the liver. There is an amount, there is a set point. There is a this is how much glycogen should be stored in this liver. There is a this is how much fat should be stored in this liver level. That's controlled by various communications back with higher command, and it's trainable, by the way. But that's how that one is basically controlled. So in the opposite situation, when you have a decreased concentration of AMP within those liver cells, that causes obviously the exact opposite reaction. It deactivates the AMP-activated kinase. It unblocks the enzyme that has been blocked, the carboxylase, the acetyl coenzyme A carboxylase enzyme. And then that acetyl coenzyme A carboxylase enzyme, once unblocked, now starts to take acetyl coenzyme A groups and it starts to bang them together. In other words, it starts to form triacylglyceride molecules from free fatty acid acetyl groups. In other words, it goes directly straight back to building. So either it's breaking down fats or it's building them up all the time, 24/7. It's a very, very busy little organ is the liver. So
question.
That's the starting point. I just wanted us to be all on the same page before we move on. Are there questions on that slide before we move to the next?
Yes. Did you mention how AMP is increasing or decreasing in the liver?
That is on a later slide for a dumb reveal moment.
So yes, I don't even know what you're talking about.
Yep.
Okay.
Cool. So if you don't understand, where does this AMP come from and what makes that go up and down, don't panic about that. I'm going to cover that a bit later in the discussion. Any other questions on that slide?
No.
Cool. I must be the bestest lecturer in the world because there are no questions, or everybody's shy.
That's right. I was wondering if there's a quiz in the end.
There will be credit to be gained. Those students that do want to stick around behind later and dust the boards with me and hang out can do that on my live stream starting in 2 hours and 45 minutes.
1 hour 45 minutes.
1 hour and 45 minutes. Thank you. From now. And we will definitely be dusting some dusters over on my channel a bit later on, and yes, it'll be fun, so don't miss that. All right, so cool. Right. Summary of slide 1. The liver, in terms of fat, the liver is either building fat molecules up or it is breaking them down and releasing ketones into the blood. It doesn't sit still. It's got 2 gears forward and backwards, but it's always running. The thing that turns the switch, forward gear, backward gear, is a thing called adenosine monophosphate. That's the summary of slide 1. Cool.
Cool.
Slide 2, if you please, Madam Slide Mover.
You're welcome. here we go. Do you see?
Right. So when the cellular energy supply drops, the ratio of ATP to ADP is reduced. Now, what we know is that the usual energy metabolism in a cell is that adenosine triphosphate, so 3 phosphates jammed onto an adenosine molecule, that is the cellular energy currency. Usually it is hydrolyzed to produce energy that is then encapsulated chemically to do cellular work, and the result is adenosine diphosphate, ADP, plus a free inorganic phosphate group. Okay, then usually what happens is cellular energy production via mitochondrial action, basically, produces in effect the energy in the form of ATP in its first instance, which is then used to basically re-jam that third phosphate group back onto the ADP molecule, thus reforming an ATP molecule, which can then be reused for energy. That's the cycle. Okay, fine, you might all say, but what in the purple hell has that got to do with adenosine monophosphate? Where the hell does that come from? Well, when you're popping phosphate groups off ATPs and making ADPs, if you do that under quite a lot of energy expenditure, then you will start stacking up ADPs in that cell. The concentration of ADP will increase. The concentration of ATP will decrease. That's a bad thing in a cell because we want to keep it there. So when we get to the point where the cell recognizes there's a cellular emergency right now, an acute cellular emergency, here's what it does. It takes 2 of those ADPs that are building up, causing a problem. Why do they cause a problem? Because if you increase the concentration of ADP on this side of the equation, it means you've got to push harder to put more ADP in there. So it slows down the rate at which that reaction progresses. It slows down the rate at which you can hydrolyze ATP for energy. It's called allosteric inhibition, if you want to look that one up. So to alleviate allosteric inhibition, you need to remove the pooling metabolite that is pushing back against that Le Chatelier swing of the equilibrium reaction, for want of better terms. I'm sure there'll be questions on this slide. Anyway, here's what happens.
Yeah,
2 ATPs building up, causing a problem, pushing back on that reaction, stopping ATP being used for energy. Why don't we bang them together, swap a phosphate group between them, produce an extra ATP, thus increasing the ATP and reducing the ADP, brilliant, but leaving behind a thing called AMP, adenosine monophosphate. So you put the cell under energy stress acutely. Adenosine monophosphate level builds up in that cell. That flicks the switch, if that's a liver cell, and says, now you got no business storing fat. Now you need to start printing money because people have been locked in their houses too long. If you're with me. Okay. That is that's the summary of that slide, basically. So increasing liver concentration of AMP also increases the rate of carbohydrate oxidation as well. It turns up both metabolisms. So it says, right, start beta oxidizing quickly, start producing ketone bodies quickly, thank you. And while you're at it, if there's any glycogen in the liver, let's get that cracked and let's get that out there in the form of blood glucose as well. Let's get things happening here. Let's provide the energy for, it's usually working muscles that causes this problem. Okay. If you've got carbohydrate oxidation going on, then you've got carbohydrate metabolism competing with fat metabolism, aka the Randle cycles at play. Right, which we'll get to in a minute. But are there questions on that slide or any of the stuff I've just said for the last few minutes? Because a lot of that was fairly abstract.
No, I don't see any questions.
So everybody understood exactly what I meant by pushing against that Le Chatelerian swing, did they? Are you paying attention, class? I said pushing it. Fine.
No, we don't give a shit about Le Chatelier.
Well, you should, because that's the thing that causes the AMP production via that transfer of a phosphate between two ADPs to be necessary.
They didn't say that. I made it up.
Good. Okay, good. Daniel says it's time for coffee. I'm quite right.
So Nesra says the eureka came at the end of the slide.
Yes.
And this is awesome, says Daniel Smith.
Kia ora, Dan.
I'm glad you like it.
Yes.
And just for your knowledge, because we're talking now, and I can say that loud, not just in the chat. Thank you so much for the super chat. Here you go.
Yeah, Cornell. I was for 17 years.
He knows.
I gave it up.
He knows.
I think Cornell is being sarcastic, but I'm just spelling that out for anybody who just might be tuning in to your channel, Pim, that has no idea who I am for some reason. Yeah.
Yeah. She says,
cool.
Yes, sir, lol. Plus, I watched your video on the Randle cycle.
Right. Excellent. Okay, so we're all happy with that. If you have A plus B chemical species acting together in an equilibrium reaction producing products C plus D, if you have a buildup of either C or D in that fluid pool, the weight of that metabolite in that solution pushes back through that equilibrium and pushes the reaction back the other way and slows down the rate at which it can proceed. So we take two ADPs, we bang them together, we produce an ATP that increases the cellular energy ratio alone. It's also backed up by a decrease in ADP at the same time. However, we produce this AMP, which the cell then uses as a signal of cellular energetics. It says, that's the switch I need to tell me to stop storing fat and start releasing it. In other words, ketogenesis. If, however, the liver is also replete with carbohydrates, carbohydrates will start spilling into the blood as well. And your muscles and brain cells will use the glucose first, leaving the ketones for second. Okay. Next slide, if you don't mind.
Right.
So, what on earth are we looking at here? In the blue compartment, at the blue bit at the very top of the slide there, that designates the extracellular fluid matrix outside a given cell. The tan-colored or middle section where most of the action is there is the area inside the cell membrane. However, the green section at the bottom specifically is the compartment which comprises the activity happening inside the mitochondria. Okay.
Can I put in a question here?
Yes, absolutely, please.
Gung Fu is asking, AMP, is that energy?
No, AMP Gung Fu is an adenosine molecule with one phosphate group appended onto its tail end. Adenosine, a great big, huge, massive molecule, and then a tiny little phosphate group jammed onto it. So AMP is basically the lowest energy configuration of adenosine. What happens with the adenosine molecules is it's got this one reactive tail, if you like, that you can jam a phosphate onto. That's AMP. Now, you can get energy out of that chemical bond if you release that phosphate so that you just have free adenosine and no phosphate. So that would be adenosine, no phosphate, or zero phosphate, if you like. One would be adenosine monophosphate, in effect in the human body, adenosine monophosphate is the lowest level we get to. But we can also jam another phosphate onto the right behind the first one, and that's a slightly harder push. There's a bigger spring to get that second one on. That's ADP. There's a third energy level. We can jam a third phosphate onto the end of that tail again. That's even harder. Bam! That's ATP. Now, commensurate with the amount of force that's required to push that phosphate on, when you hydrolyze it and let it go, the same amount of energy is released. And that's what the cell's using to encapture that energy chemically and use it for whatever, the designs are of that cell at the time. Hope that clarifies that. Good question, Gung Fu. Like it a lot. So let's look at the situation here. This is a hypothetical situation where there is a great deal of free fatty acid being delivered from the blue extracellular space to the tan-colored intracellular space, the cell fluid, and immediately, everything inside the cell membrane, if you like, except for the mitochondrial compartments, which we're viewing as a separate compartment inside the cell, like layers of an onion, if you like. So in this case, we have a lot of free fatty acid being delivered, which gets delivered to a liver cell inside a lipoprotein package, which is created in the intestine, and that is a chylomicron, I think it is. It's the lowest density of all low-density lipoproteins, although it's not classified as a low-density lipoprotein. It's classified under its own nomenclature by the people who think they're scientists, and that's fine, whatever. But it's this big, very low density, very large package containing a lot of lipid, such as triacylglyceride and cholesterol and anything else that's not water soluble, basically. That large chylomicron vesicle will bind to the vascular epithelial cells immediately overlying the muscle, according to joining a particular receptor in the liver that says this is where you stop within this small vessel. Oh, bam, you're caught. And then that vesicle opens up and delivers some of the payload into that muscle cell, closes off, detaches, floats further downstream, gets re-caught, a bit more of it comes out, and it gets smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. And then suddenly we end up with basically some remnant lipoprotein left behind, which is recycled, and we're left with pretty much empty chylomicrons. All the fat and cholesterol has been delivered to the liver, which is the great bank of fat and carbohydrate, well, and amino acids as well for the body. So let's say chylomicrons arrive because we've eaten a lot of fat, and let's dump this fat straight into the cell fluid here. And basically that's via the CD36 protein, the receptor there that achieves that. That free fatty acid floats through that cell cytosol. It then activates the CPT1 transporter on the membrane, the outer membrane of the mitochondria, and that dumps basically long chain fatty acyl coenzyme A, which is what is being delivered into the cell from the chylomicron. It dumps that into the mitochondrial space, basically. And then the mitochondrial space says, lots and lots of fat energy. Let's start the process of beta-oxidation to produce acetyl coenzyme A, which is the first intermediary of the Krebs citric acid cycle, whatever you want to call it, that drives the production of reducing equivalents, which are used to react with electrons in the electron transport chain of the mitochondria and thus produce the energy. Okay, so that being the case, a lot of fat's been dumped in, a lot of beta-oxidation occurs. The level of acetyl coenzyme A, that first intermediary of the TCA cycle, starts to build up within the cell. Some of it is burned, some of it is oxidized for the energy needs of the cell. And that produces the carbon dioxide plus water that you see at the very bottom of the slide between the two green enzymes. However, if more fat is being delivered to the cell than it can possibly use at that time for energy, then the level of acetyl coenzyme A will build up in the mitochondria. The buildup of acetyl coenzyme A allosterically inhibits the delivery of acetyl coenzyme A from pyruvate. So what we're saying is, if you pour fat into a cell, that will blockade all the red stuff, all the sugar coming in. Randle cycle. It's blocked, can't get in there. Because pyruvate will start to build up in the cell, but the pyruvate will not go through pyruvate dehydrogenase complex and end up as acetyl coenzyme A, because the acetyl coenzyme A level is already too high. So the cell says, okay,
for a second?
Yes, please. Yeah, good.
Because we lost connection, I think, for like 20 seconds.
Oh, okay.
So if you could just, well, my whole screen disappeared anyway, and I heard you talk on the other side of the wall.
I'll repackage the last chunk.
Yeah.
All right. Fat is pouring into the cell. That causes acetyl coenzyme A to build up. Some of it is used for carbon and produces carbon dioxide and water and is used for energy. That keeps the level of acetyl coenzyme A under some control. Nonetheless, if there's more fat coming in than is being used, then it will start to build up. That will deactivate the pyruvate dehydrogenase complex enzyme. That will blockade sugar, the whole pathway for sugar. That's why the veg-tards say, oh, too much fat in your cell blocks sugar, and that's what causes insulin resistance, and that's why you die if you eat high fat and stuff. And I'm like, oh my word, are you really, really that limited, people? Really? Anyway. So the other thing that happens is that if acetyl coenzyme A continues to build up, then the level of citrate will also build up in the mitochondrial fluid, because citrate is also one of the intermediaries of the tricarboxylic acid cycle, and it can diffuse easily across that membrane into the cell space, which it does. So you'll see above the citrate in green, in the tan area, there's another citrate. In other words, it's gone across that membrane and it's now diffusing into the cell space. When citrate builds up inside the cell space, that blockades phosphofructokinase number 1, which further inhibits any sugar getting through. And it also directly inhibits the GLUT4 transporter, which stops any more sugar even entering the cell at all. So why does that happen? Well, it's because sugar building up inside a cell is toxic to a cell. It causes glycation of proteins. It screws up cell organelles. It interferes with all sorts of things. It gets inside the cell nucleus and screws around with DNA. It's not good stuff. So obviously, if you've got enough energy coming in the form of fat, let's turn the sugar tap right off. So the sugar will then start to build up in the blood if you're pouring sugar into your system. Because if that's a liver cell and it's full of fat, it will have a level of glycogen that it can store in the face of fat intake. But once its pools are replete, all the sugar is going to be locked out. And we're going to have increasing blood sugar levels at that stage.
Stefan has a question.
Yes.
So if it stays outside the cell, isn't that bad as well?
Yes, but it's less bad, because in your blood, mostly what's happening is the red blood cells are becoming glycated if there's too much glucose in your blood chronically. There's also some irritation of the epithelial cells, which is a very bad thing, absolutely, which you will respond to over years and years by developing a severe allergic reaction called atherosclerosis, heart disease. That'll take 20, 30, 40 years to kill you. The same level of glucose elevation inside a cell is an immediate challenge to your life. If someone presents to hospital with elevated blood glucose, they've got a serious problem because that can kill quickly. So good question. Thank you. So that's situation A. Let's move to situation B, which is the next slide. Oh.
I have to do work.
Yes, you do. It's not really a lazy stream after all, is it? You also have to keep an eye on the chat to make sure everybody's questions get answered.
I am.
Good. Let's now imagine the opposite situation is in effect. There is a lot of glucose in the blood, but there is not much fat in the blood because you've eaten a meal that's almost entirely carbohydrate based. Obviously, that glucose will be dumped into your bloodstream. That will then be grabbed by the GLUT4 transporter on the top left, where it says glucose in the blue from the blood, basically, or extracellular fluid, entering the cell. In this case, let's say it's still a liver cell, and sugar's coming in because the level of stored glycogen in the liver at the moment is suboptimal. Let's say we've done some exercise, we've drained our liver of glycogen, and now we've had a carbohydrate refeed. And so the liver will try and reset back to its set point. So the sugar in the blood, it will see that on the GLUT4 transporter C, and it will pull that sugar in. I need that, thanks, I'll have it. And then phosphofructokinase number 1 and 2 do their thing. There's the isomerization there, and we get the fructose 1,6-diphosphate, and then you get pyruvate, and that's all outside the mitochondria. That all happens in the cell cytosol. Pyruvate then is transported inside the mitochondria on a monocarboxylate transporter. Pyruvate then pours through the pyruvate dehydrogenase complex and produces a bunch of acetyl coenzyme A. That, because we now have more energy pouring into the cell than the cell can use in terms of acetyl coenzyme A being used by the mitochondria to produce carbon dioxide and water and energy, we get that very same buildup of citrate that was occurring in the first situation. That citrate then diffuses into the cell space, and then an enzyme there called ACL transmutes that into an acetyl coenzyme A molecule outside the mitochondria. And then there's an enzyme called acetyl coenzyme A carboxylase, which transmutes that acetyl coenzyme A into a thing called malonyl coenzyme A. Now, remember I said if your AMP concentration goes up in the cell, then ACC is blockaded, acetyl coenzyme A carboxylase. So this transmutation of acetyl coenzyme here to malonyl coenzyme A cannot occur if the cellular energy level is low. If the cellular energy level is high and AMP concentration is low, then this whole line proceeds up to malonyl coenzyme A. Malonyl coenzyme A, building up inside the cell fluid, blockades the CPT1 here and stops further fat entry. It also blockades, it also causes an upregulation of producing triglycerides from free fatty acids for sending off somewhere else at a later date. So in other words, you pour sugar in, it blockades the fat pathway burning. That's the Randle cycle in a nutshell, and that's how all of that is relevant to ketogenesis. because in the liver, beta-oxidation produces ketones, whereas in the skeletal muscle tissues, the brain tissues, all the remote tissues, beta-oxidation produces energy. It produces a acetyl coenzyme A, which is used directly in those cells to produce energy, whereas the liver is acting as a banker. So is that clear on that stuff? Questions on any or all of that?
Yes, we have a couple of questions. So Shell says, when the body makes its own glucose, does it engage Randle cycle?
Probably not, Shell, and I'll tell you why. Anytime you have consumed either fewer or the exact same number of calories in effect that you genuinely have spent during the day, there will be an energy deficit or an energy balance. The Randle cycle will not be at play then because nothing's blockaded. There is no buildup of acetyl coenzyme A. Therefore, there's no buildup of citrate. Therefore, nothing's blockading nothing. Everything flows through, sugars and fats, happy as Larry. It's the first, second, third, 100th and 1000th and 2000th calorie above requirement, all of those calories, they're the ones that will be blockaded if those calories have a mixed macronutrient makeup, fats and carbohydrates, because they will cross-inhibit each other out. They will build up inside the cell fluid, therefore. They will therefore be transmuted into triacylglyceride, packaged inside low-density lipoprotein cholesterol packages and sent off from the liver around the blood. That will shut off ketogenesis, because the liver is either storing fats, building fats up, or it's breaking them down, and the process of breaking them down produces ketone bodies. So why does the liver produce ketone bodies? Why doesn't the liver just send acetyl coenzyme A through the blood to the remote tissues where it's needed? Well, next slide, unless there are more questions.
We have more questions.
Oh, please,
and
more
I
questions.
wanted to give you a hypothetical question as well. So let's say your energy needs is 2000 calories. You're only eating 1990 calories. Can you eat whatever you want without having that problem with
in terms of macronutrient makeup? Yes, absolutely. Here's the issue, though.
Make ketones?
You will make a small amount, because basically, when are you storing up fats? You're storing up fats postprandially in the 2, 3, 4 hours post-meal, depending on the fat content of that meal. When are you beta oxidizing? When are you producing ketones? If you eat once a day, it's the other 20 hours.
Yes, but if you eat once a day and you eat 1990 calories in one meal, you're going to get an energy surplus, aren't you?
It might be 4, 5, 6, 7 hours, might be 8 hours, leaving you only 16 rather than 20. But the other 16 to 20 hours, you will be in katabolus, you will be in ketosis.
But that's how we're meant to be working.
Exactly. It's a gear that's supposed to run forwards and backwards at a flick of a switch, at the simple pulling in or out of that plug that goes into that wall socket, that enzyme that blocks it and unblocks it. It's an instantaneous thing.
The Randle cycle is actually not that bad. It's fine. If you're not.
Of course, it's fine. It's developed over 3,800 million years of evolution. Every single one of those circles indicates an enzyme, which is a protein encoded for by a length of DNA. And that DNA has survived and works because it has been proven to work and control energy metabolism for a very, very, very large number of millions of years.
Yeah, so what I wanted to point out is basically, if you're not overeating, you don't actually have to worry too much about it. However, if we're going to talk about another perspective, like nutrient density and are you getting everything you need, then we have to start worrying about it. So when people are saying you can actually eat whatever you eat, but whatever you want, as long as you're not eating too much, in terms of this, from this aspect, that's true.
Okay. Yes, absolutely. However, that said, if you eat a diet which is mixed macro based, in other words, fat and carbohydrate together, that tends to cause you to lead you to consume more calories than you require over time. And thus, those extra calories will be stored as fat on your body as a result of insulin resistance that you will develop as a result of that. The whole Randle cycle thing will kick in. It will destroy your health and your life. If you eat 1 calorie extra per day, then your disease process will progress, but it will progress very, very slowly. If you eat 1,000 calories extra a day, your disease process will progress rapidly. It's a matter of how badly your transgression is above requirement versus intake. And if you eat a mixed macro diet, you will tend to overeat. If you eat a fat and meat-based diet, you will not overeat.
You heard it here.
You are genetically programmed to seek out the benefit, the dopamine reward, and the quick fix of the carbohydrates, because for the vast majority of the last 350,000 years that our species has existed, we couldn't get any carbohydrates from anywhere, really. We could get some, and when we could get them, we got them. But we are not designed to live on them, especially not when you mix fat in there as well. Excuse me.
Right. Next question.
Next question, yes.
Joe, PFK1 subunits, does that have any significance? Because that citrate had an inhibiting effect on that as well as GLUT4, right?
Yes, the phosphofructokinase enzyme number 1 subunit is absolutely required in the process of the series of reactions leading from glucose 6-phosphate and fructose 6-phosphate through to fructose 1,6-biphosphate. Without that enzyme, that reaction cannot occur. If you cannot build up any fructose 1,6-biphosphate, then you cannot build up any pyruvate. If you cannot build up any pyruvate, you've blockaded the whole chain, is what I'm saying. Does that make sense? So you build up citrate inside the cell because there's a lot of fat coming in that blockades the phosphofructokinase 1 subunit. Yeah?
Mm-hmm.
Happy? Cool.
I'm happy.
Cool.
Luke says, wait, does the Randle cycle explain why carbs can raise triglycerides?
Yes, it does. The Randle cycle explains just about everything you need to understand about human metabolism in terms of energy production, macronutrient makeup of the diet, and everything. It's relevant at all times as soon as you exceed the actual effective daily caloric expenditure by even 1 calorie. As soon as you do that, the Randle cycle is in play and you are storing fat. If you are storing fat, by the way, that means you are also inflamed because you have an increased monophosphate concentration. You also have an increased free phosphate concentration, and free phosphate is the thing that binds to the inflammatory cytokines and tells them to turn on and be inflamed. Interesting, isn't it? It's all linked together. Okay, so slide number the next.
No, we have questions still.
Oh, good.
They're pouring in.
Oh, excellent.
Stefan
That's great.
says, what about eating carbs early in the morning and meat and fat and a little bit of vegetables 6, 7, 8 hours after that? Can that work?
No, it can't, unfortunately, Stefan, and I'll tell you why later in the presentation again, so watch out for that, but I'll say it here now as a quick spoiler. It takes days to drain your liver of glycogen. That's why it takes days to get into ketosis.
So that's interesting.
Energy level drops.
You don't have any energy when you wake up in the morning. That's why you need breakfast.
No, because when you wake up in the morning, there's a thing called the morning phenomenon or the AM phenomenon, which is as soon as the dawn phenomenon, as soon as your body recognizes that the light of the new day is dawning, in other words, there are receptors in your eyes and in your skin that sense light. When they sense that happening, they dump a bolus of glucose into your bloodstream. It's called the morning effect. And it's there because you're about to wake up and get ready, and you need some fuel to get your muscles doing what they're doing quickly, etc., etc. Yep, great question. Cool.
Shell says, love this great stuff.
You're very welcome. I love the picture. It's very, very horny.
And Cornell says, is there a positive side to carbs?
In the diet, for the vast majority of human beings, the answer is absolutely not. They're disastrous. There is a genetic variation around the set point, and the set point is no carbs at all. It seems like when you look at the N15 data that tells us what we've eaten for the last 350,000 years, it looks like human beings at large have ranged between 80 and 100% carnivorous throughout their existence on this planet. So there's been about a 20% intake at the highest end. And those people that tend to have skeletons showing the higher carb intake, the 20% carb intake, generally those skeletons come from equatorial zones where there was slightly more carbohydrate to be had, pretty much. Makes perfect sense, really.
Do you think people who originate from those regions would be more carb tolerant and maybe have a quicker switch or function better on carbohydrates than other people?
Yes, but if you're thinking your South American genes will help you there.
No, they don't do well at all.
No, exactly, because you've got the mixed with Swedish genes, which are way up beyond the, so you've got bad.
My dad's genes are not good with carbohydrates. I know.
Oh, that as well. Okay,
all my cousins, everyone who's adopted to a more modern diet, they're just dropping dead from all kind of diseases. But those who are actually older, they live to be more than 100 years old. So I'm pretty sure that my specific genes are not.
All right. So Cornell, in terms of, is there a positive side to carbs? Yes. Human beings tend to do best on an individual basis, depending on the closeness of equatorial association of their genes over the last, several generations, the most recent amount of stuff. Somewhere between 0 and 20% of the total caloric intake from carbohydrates is what we've done as a species for the last 350,000 years. And the genes determine where your sweet spot is, really. But it will be somewhere in there. In terms of a positive side of carbs in the body, well, yeah, because without carbs in the body, you will die, because you cannot contract muscles without carbohydrates at all. And you cannot run your brain without carbohydrates at all. That doesn't mean you need to eat any, though, because your body's capable of manufacturing its own. Why is it capable of that? Because for the vast majority of the last 350,000 years, there were no carbs to be had. So we had to evolve our means to produce our own, didn't we? Yes. Excellent. Next question.
Shell says, you can burn either one, just not at the same time.
If the acetyl coenzyme A level in the mitochondria of the cells of the body at large, if there is no buildup, then yes, you can burn fat and carbohydrate. It moves up and down. It's all controlled by metabolism. That's fine. As soon as there's a buildup in acetyl coenzyme A, because either there's a lot of fat or a lot of carbohydrate, or both pouring in, if there's a lot of fat pouring in, it will block glucose off. If there's a lot of carbohydrate pouring in, it will block fat off. If there's a lot of both pouring in, it'll block both. and that energy will all go to fat storage, and you'll be as inflamed as hell, and you'll develop diabetes and heart disease and many forms of cancer at some point, and dementia and all sorts.
Yep. Nesra says, about 4 days, heard it from Professor B. Ye shall reject carbs so that Master Randle be spared.
Yes.
So take off your blinkers, it says. The carb cycling is not good.
I'm not a fan of it, no. There's no need for it. If you get someone fully fat adapted, which takes about 20 weeks if it's done properly, then there is no need whatsoever to be carb cycling. Super chat, super chat, super chat.
Oh, no, I can't see it. I'm too far up the thingy. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you a lot.
Rock, Sarah.
Let's jump back to that one.
Yeah.
So, carb cycling, is there, let's say you are very well fat adapted.
Yeah.
You want to do carb cycling. Is there a limit where we kind of just put, if you want to do some carb cycling, would 10 grams, 20 grams, 50 grams, 100 grams of carbs, where's the limit? Where would be a problem in terms of making you inflamed rather than getting the effect that most people would want from carb cycling?
Okay. If your effective energy intake is the same or less than your effective energy expenditure, then you can be 100% carbohydrate based if you like. You will be nutrient deficient on that diet, but there won't be a Randle cycle issue. It's that first calorie after the effective expenditure in the second, third, 100th and 200th and 500th and 1000th. They're the calories that will be blockaded by Randle cycle issues.
So if you want to do a good carb cycling, then you could be fat adapted, and on the day that you're doing your carb cycling, you're just eating very little.
Let's understand what is the lever, what is the control over the level of glycogen stored in your muscles at rest. It is your physical training status. It is not dietary. The only way you can train your body to store more glycogen in your muscles is to stress your muscles. In other words, to drain those muscles of glycogen and then allow them to refill their pools, either by gluconeogenesis if you're sensible, or if you like inflammation and death, by pouring carbohydrates down your gob. Those are your choices. The thing that determines your glycogen level is your training status, not the provision from your diet. A low carbohydrate diet does not drain the resting muscles of glycogen storage. Your glycogen level remains the same. And a low carbohydrate diet does not deleteriously affect your ability to replete your muscle glycogen pools post-exercise and recover, because glycogen pools were the same in the one study I've seen that was reasonably controlled that looked at this issue on a high carbohydrate diet and a zero carbohydrate diet. Zero carbohydrate diet post-exercise netted the same repletion of the glycogen muscle pool at the same time point as did a bolus of glucose. If anything, the fat provision from gluconeogenesis was quicker. Slightly quicker, not statistically so, but that's interesting, isn't it?
Yes. So what about people like me? I know that maybe I didn't eat enough fat when I did my strict carnivore experiment, but I got really depressed, and then carbs actually helped me getting out of that depressive state. So that would indicate that there's more of a chemical imbalance in my amino acids in my brain or something like that. What
possibly that, possibly that also. There can be effects on various hormones and things if if you're not taking in enough fat. I mean, most of our important hormones are fat-based, cholesterol-based, in fact. Super chat. Pierce
Grinnell, thank you so much. I appreciate that. Now I lost the chat again. So I know there are a few people in the chat. They're not saying anything right now, but I know that they have gone on a strict carnivore diet, and then they have reintroduced a little bit of, some berries here and there, not necessarily every day, and they feel much better.
Those people's genes come from equatorial zones most recently, I can guarantee you.
Okay.
If they went and got a 23andMe and got where is my genetic heritage most recently, those people who do best with something like about 20% energy from carbohydrates, guess what? Your genes are equatorial.
Do you not think that maybe it could be that they have some underlying disease, maybe interfering with things? I mean, we all have our story, and we all have some nutritional abuse from the past.
I get where you're kind of aiming at there, my love, but to me, if there's a disease process going on caused by faulty metabolism, that disease would not be ameliorated by continuing that particular abuse. And if you say, I feel real bad on 0 carbs, but I feel great on 20% carbs, that's where your genes come from. You feel great because that's where your sweet spot is.
Right.
If that was a problem, you wouldn't feel better for the 20 grams of carbs. In the same way that I never feel better for beer or pizza, or arguing with my girlfriend. That never makes me feel better either. Because there's no arguing here, and you can't win. Basically, she's in charge.
Oh, that's such bullshit. But I don't think anyone believes you there. Luke says, South American gene power.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah, you have some berries, Luke.
Yeah.
You're allowed.
Yep. Luke, the Brazilian.
Yeah. So Itchy says, so Bart, does that mean glycogen stored in muscles get used up quicker, causing muscular fatigue?
No. The rate at which glycogen is used in your muscles, Itchy, is determined by the exercise intensity that those muscles are undertaking. And we're talking about muscles because they're the most metabolically active tissues in our body. Really, we could be talking about any cell of the body that is remote from the liver. The cells that use the energy, the consumers of the bank of energy from the liver. That cell's energy rate of expenditure determines its rate of, glycogenolysis. And the training status of that human being determines the resting glycogen level set point of the cells in that person's body. I hope that's clear. And those chickens were so cute, Itchy. Thank you for those pictures.
Yeah, I got them too.
Oh, my word. They are the cutest little yellow chickens I have ever seen. Anyway, next.
Anyway, I'm looking at if I can find some more questions before we go on. I don't think so. The chat is going quite quickly right now.
Good. That's awesome.
Pizza doesn't love Daniel, apparently.
Pizza doesn't love me either. I love pizza, but it's unrequited love.
Right. Let's do the next slide then. There you go.
Okay. So what we're basically looking at here is a schematic idea. What this graph really suggests to us is this. In the middle, the slim cylindrical shape there, that is the circulation of blood in the vasculature. Basically, free fatty acids in the blood, when they first enter the blood from the intestinal tract, those free fatty acids are added to the blood in the form of a package of extremely low density lipoprotein called a chylomicron, which, as I said, is not classified as such, but what the hell it is. It carries lipids such as triacylglycerides and cholesterol and anything else that's not water soluble. So in other words, wouldn't dissolve in the blood. And those packages deliver the chylomicrons are encoded to bind specifically to liver cells, specific species of liver cells. There is a specific receptor for them. So they can go past any tissue and they'll just float straight past that tissue because there are no receptors for chylomicrons anywhere except in the liver. That's where they end up as soon as the blood goes through the liver. The liver epithelial cells recognize that chylomicron and they grab it and they start sucking that triglyceride into the liver. So while ever the liver storage value, the amount of triacylglyceride, the amount of triglyceride stored in the liver, while ever that is suboptimal, subset point, then the liver will absorb those chylomicrons and it will use that delivered fatty acid to have a pool of free fatty acid inside the liver. When there is a buildup of fatty acyl coenzyme A inside the liver cells, because now we're starting to exceed the set point. Now it's starting to build up. The fat's building up. That absolutely guarantees that the AMP concentration in the cell is minimized because the energy state is great. There's plenty of substrate in the form of the fat. And so basically that fat would then go through the acetyl coenzyme A carboxylase reaction and form malonyl coenzyme A, and thus we're storing fat. Anytime the amount of fat in the blood traversing through the liver drops, then what the liver storage fat is then immediately used to do is to split that fat to put some fat back into the blood to keep the blood level stable. And that's in the form of beta-oxidation, which you see at the top of that left-hand box here where it says beta-oxidation. And beta-oxidation leads to acetyl coenzyme A building up in the cell, inside that liver cell. Now, remember when I said before, why don't we just send acetyl coenzyme A to the muscle cells where it's needed through the blood? It's because the coenzyme A part of that molecule is this massive, convoluted, huge thing. You can't pass that through cell walls. It's stuck in the sac it's in. If that coenzyme A is inside the mitochondria, that's where it's going to stay. If it's inside the cell but outside the mitochondria, it's going to stay there. And you're not going to be sending acetyl coenzyme A's through the blood for that reason. It's this huge, massive thing. It's not practical. So when the body goes, right, I need to send energy in the form of acetyl groups through the blood to the muscles, what it then has to do is remove the acetyl coenzyme A from it and send the acetyl group off by itself. But here's the problem. Acetyl groups are basically volatile. You put them into the blood and that blood will traverse through the lungs, and then that acetyl group, that acetate group, will basically become gas. It becomes volatile and you'll breathe it out and you will lose that metabolite. The body doesn't want to lose a bunch of metabolites, so it has a way of counteracting that, and the way it counteracts that is this thing called ketogenesis, the production of ketone bodies. So here's what we do. We take two acetyl coenzyme A molecules under where it says ACAT, and they're basically joined together by another enzyme to form another enzyme called HMG coenzyme A, which, keep that in mind because that should be a familiar molecule to everybody. That having occurred, the buildup of HMG coenzyme A through another enzyme called HMGCl leads to an accumulation of a product called acetoacetate. Now, acetoacetate is two acetyl groups joined together, basically, less volatile. However, acetoacetate, when it leaves the cell and it enters the blood, because the blood is an open system at the lungs, the acetoacetate can dissociate an acetone, and that acetone will then float away and be lost. So when people are in deep ketosis and you smell that acetone breath, that's what's going on. There's an insensible loss of energy substrate in the form of the stuff actually bubbling out of the blood at the lungs and being breathed out as a gas. So to counteract that, the body has another reaction catalyzed by BDH, which leads to a thing called beta-hydroxybutyrate, which is the ketone body that is red in your blood or in your urine when you do a ketone test to see if you're still in ketosis. Beta-hydroxybutyrate will not drift away at the lungs. It is not volatile at the lungs. It remains in the blood. Your body retains it. That's why your body does that. Okay, so we can't move in a coenzyme A molecule from liver to muscle, for example. Too big, too hard. There's no pore big enough to get this massive molecule out. So we need to use the acetyl group without the coenzyme A molecule that makes it stable in a cell. So we need to put that out into the cell. Only if we did that, it would immediately bubble out at the lungs and would lose a lot. So therefore, we go through a reaction that produces acetoacetate, I should say. There's still some vulnerability of that one, so there's still a small amount of insensible loss. However, if we use a little bit of energy to produce beta-hydroxybutyrate, that stabilizes the molecule. Cool? So in the blood, we have beta-hydroxybutyrate, which is the main ketone body. We have acetoacetate, which is diffused across into the blood. We've lost some from acetone, but we've got acetoacetate going in directly from the blood. We've got beta-hydroxybutyrate going in from the blood. The beta-hydroxybutyrate is transformed by BDH to acetoacetate, and then that goes through OXCT to produce acetoacetyl coenzyme A, which is the reverse reaction of what we've got going on here, which produces acetyl coenzyme A for the tricarboxylic acid cycle. That's how the energy is transferred using ketones from the liver to the working muscles, let's say, for example. Okay, questions on that?
Yes, let's start with a question that came in just after you started this slide from Necrokitty.
Yep.
What about carbs from dairy? I know a lot of Europeans seem to do well on dairy with the carnivore diets.
Yep. Okay, the carb that you'll get from dairy is galactose. There is a large proportion of the human population that are lactose intolerant. Those people will not do well on dairy. They should avoid it. There is a genetic diversion, if you like. There are a number of human beings who are not lactose intolerant, and those people will do fine on dairy. There's also technologies around A1 and A2 dairy, which is leading to help more people be able to tolerate dairy. There's nothing magical about dairy. There's no requirement for dairy in a weaned mammal, but it is an option for people. There are a number of populations that do get, say, 20% of their energy from carbohydrates. It is in the form of galactose, and you'll find those people running around in Africa mixing their milk with their blood. Those guys.
Right. So
Cool.
yeah, it seems like people are getting it. Daniel
Excellent.
gets it. Nesra
Good.
got it.
Good.
Not sure what Daniel says. People need to this big time.
Need to watch this, I would say. Well,
Yeah,
in that case, Daniel, what you do is link it to all your social media and say, this is great. People need to understand this. Watch this and stuff.
Yeah.
Yep. And also feel free to super chat the absolute hell out of Pim, because she really is doing a great thing here by
having you on.
not only full time, but also trying to run a YouTube channel as well. And not only working full time, but actually she's now doing the job of 4 different people who have all been sacked by the people that employ her because of what's been happening. So, everybody should be thanking Pim a million times over. Carry on.
Thank you. Speaking of which, actually, I now have memberships on my YouTube channel. So if you want to actually support the channel, you can be a member and get a little badge next to your name and be super
that's cute.
cool. Yeah,
that's cute. I'd never do anything like that on my channel. That would be so gay.
Yeah. So all of you who are subscribed and members of his channel, you should just unsubscribe there and come over to mine because he thinks it's gay.
Come on now.
I think it's cute.
There you go.
Right. Thanks, Daniel. Thanks for sharing.
The use of the word gay there did not refer to homosexuals. It referred to light-hearted, fun.
Yes.
Gay is a word that meant fun and joviality throughout history. So get fucked, you fucking lefties that want to go, oh, he said gay in a pejorative way. The word is homosexual if referring to homosexuals, and I was not. So get fucked. Right.
Now you screwed it up. Now this video won't be monetized.
That'll be fine. You can say that later in the video, and it's not a problem.
Not gay. Pim, sorry about your job. Sounds crazy. Yeah, it's not been a good 2 weeks. Let's put it like that. How good is Pim that she's the one that didn't get let go? Yeah.
Indispensable.
Obviously.
If they did let her go, they'd be screwed because
I'm the only one who knows the GC.
No, nobody else knows how to do her job, so they'd be fucked if they let her go.
I barely know, to be fair, but there you go. No one else knows anything.
Don't be silly. I won't have that.
Right, so shall we continue then?
Yes, go on. What's next?
Next slide. Beta-oxidation.
Right, so once we've got a build-up of fatty acids in the cells of the liver over and above its set point of storage, it will start immediately to beta-oxidize. Here it is. Step 1, we take a, let's say, C18 length free fatty acid molecule. And what basically happens is it's called beta-oxidation because the last 2 carbon linkages on the end of that chain are cleaved off in a 4-step process, producing eventually acetyl coenzyme A. You can read through all those reactions pretty much for yourself, but we'll go through it just very quickly for those that don't like to read things. Basically, step 1 is the dehydrogenation of the fatty acyl coenzyme A, the last 2 carbon units with all their hydrogens. A couple of those hydrogens are whipped off, dehydrogenated. Okay. The second step is hydration of the new double bond that's formed by taking some of those hydrogens away, causing some of those carbons to reconfigure as double bonds. We need to hydrate that bond. That happens at step 2. And then step 3, which for some reason here is called step 1, you get dehydration of the beta hydroxyl group to a ketone, where the electrons are removed and transferred to NAD+. And in the 4th step, which is also called step 1, acylation occurs, which is the addition of the coenzyme A, that great big molecule, to the thing, producing the acetyl coenzyme A, which is the first intermediary of the tricarboxylic acid or Krebs cycle. So that is beta-oxidation. You get a length of C18, C36, C20, we'll see whatever it is with hydrogens. That's your fatty acid moiety, if you like, that's been split off the triacyl glyceride. And then we're just basically stepwise cleaving off 2 carbon units, 2 carbon units, 2 carbon units, and making acetyl coenzyme A out of them. That's the process of beta oxidation. Cool?
Cool.
Next. Right. So if you have a buildup of acetyl coenzyme A in those cells in the liver that are controlling this, they will say, that means it's ketogenesis time, because we cannot send acetyl coenzyme A outside the liver cell because the coenzyme A is so massive, it's completely there, and we can't send the acyl group off by itself because it would just dissolve out of the blood and be breathed out of the lungs and would lose it. So we go through this process of producing ketones, which stabilize the molecule so that we can maintain most of it and use it for energy. Great. So the first half of the pathway is as you see there. And you'll see that the first enzyme is a thiolase enzyme, which basically takes one of those coenzyme A SHs away, thus condensing those two acetyl coenzyme A's into an acetyl coenzyme A. The second enzyme in the tree is a thing called HMG coenzyme A synthase. That's where statins work. That's the enzyme that statins inhibit. That's where statins discourage this particular metabolic pathway. If you take statins, your ability to produce ketones will therefore be reduced, among the many other problems you will find with the dangerous contraindicated poisons known as statins. There's a new one for you. Statins reduce your ability to produce ketones. Wow. Anyway, so then we get this 3-hydroxy-3-methyl-glutarol coenzyme A, which is the result after that enzyme that is blockaded by statins has done its thing in the normal case of events, and you've got 3-hydroxy-3-methyl-glutarol coenzyme A. Next.
Yes.
Next slide. Okay, so 3-hydroxy-3-methyl-glutarol coenzyme A then undergoes another enzymatic reaction here where an acetyl coenzyme A is kind of liberated from there, and that forms the the acetoacetate. So that's kind of stabilized it from acetate, which would just, the acetone, which would just float away. However, that acetoacetate will still evolve an acetone and a CO2, and both of those things will be breathed out at the lungs and would lose that. So on the left, you see this NADH, NAD powered chemical shift where we take an acetoacetate and we basically add some hydrogens from the reducing equivalents, and that forms a beta-hydroxybutyrate, which is the stable one that doesn't float away. That's the one that we're going to test for when we do a test for ketones. That's the thing that's going to be floating around in our blood. So as long as you've got halfway reasonable energy supply in your body, you'll be able to transform almost all of that acetoacetate into beta-hydroxybutyrate, thus minimizing the spontaneous loss over here. Does that make sense?
Okay. We're
Questions?
back, I lost you.
Okay, for how long?
I heard about the left step with the beta-hydroxybutyrate, and then I think you moved over to acetone, but I didn't hear anything from there.
So what I'm saying is if you've got halfway reasonable energy supply here in the form of NADH, then most of the acetoacetate will be transmuted into beta-hydroxybutyrate, which is not volatile. You will not breathe out at the lungs. You will not lose. You'll be able to use that for energy. Thus it makes it safe for the body as an energy substrate. Over here, anything that remains as acetoacetate because the energy level isn't ideal, that energy will be lost insensibly, spontaneously, because any acetoacetate that floats around in the blood for any period of time will spontaneously split off a CO2, leaving an acetone behind. Both CO2 and acetone will be breathed out of the lungs and you'll lose the lot. So the primary pathway is on the left to beta-hydroxybutyrate. And that's what we measure when we do a ketone P test or a ketone blood test. They're looking for beta-hydroxybutyrate that's pooled in your blood. Are you in ketosis? Is it 1 millimole per liter? Is it 4? Or is it 0.25? Whatever it is that you're measuring. Yeah?
Yes, and as Ra says, so molecular volatility, is it only determined by bonds and weight, or are there other contributing factors when it comes to the whole organism?
The volatility of a molecule in an open fluid system is determined by quantum constraints around that particular molecule. Most of the volatile ones are more basic, smaller molecules, of course, with certain energy propensities to bust off and become gas at various different temperatures and energy inputs and things. That's a whole lecture for another day. Suffice to say, for the purpose of this lecture, that beta-hydroxybutyrate is not volatile in the blood where acetoacetate is. Yeah?
A question from me. Are you getting into the testing and the usefulness of doing that, etc.?
Yes.
Okay. I'm not going to ask questions about that right now then. Okay, we're up to speed.
Yes.
Next one?
Next. Yes.
There we go.
Okay. So people say ketones are an alternative to glucose when glucose supply in the diet is insufficient. Bollocks. In deep nutritional ketosis in non-type 1 insulin-dependent diabetics and normal people, the level of energy provided to the brain, for example, through ketones never really exceeds much more than about 20%, apparently. 80% of the energy of the brain is supplied, even in deep nutritional ketosis, through glucose. That glucose being produced by the body in the liver in response to the need to produce glucose via the same sort of activation processes, whereby glucose is created from, for example, glycerol backbones from free fatty acids that have been beta-oxidized. Lactate can be used as a substrate for gluconeogenesis, and there are several gluconeogenic amino acids as well. So your body is capable of producing all the sugar it needs over time, and in general, it does just that. Ketogenesis occurs because it's a rapid and homeostatic way of shuttling energy from one part of the body to another part of the body through the blood with relative ease and rapidity. When you think about it, if you wanted to send off triglyceride molecules to remote tissues, you have to package those up inside low-density lipoprotein cholesterol, which you have to synthesize. You have to get that ready to evolve from the cell, and you have to get that into the blood, and then it has to go through the blood and then find the right receptor and then open. All these really small monocarboxylates that are shuttling energy around the place are all small molecules that can diffuse either passively or through monocarboxylate transporters from one cell compartment to another through the blood, from one tissue in the liver to another tissue, the working muscle cells, very, very quickly. That's why it occurs. Ketogenesis does not mimic starving. You are not starving. You are providing the energy your body needs from stored energy in your body when you are undertaking ketosis. When is that happening? When your blood energy level drops, or the sensing of the energy level through the metabolites in your blood drops, so that you've got a drop of, for example, glucose in the blood, and then that will cause the dumping of these things to occur. All right. Pretty much that's it on that slide. That's why ketogenesis occurs. It occurs as a rapid energy buffer to move energy from storage in the liver to make it available to the working muscles very, very quickly through the medium of the rapidly traversing blood. Cool. Next slide.
Yes.
Okay, so what is the goal of the ketogenic way of eating usually? Okay, for the vast majority of people who ever undertake a ketogenic diet, they are doing it because they either want to lose fat from their body because they're told this is the way to get skinny, or they want to maintain a slim physique that they already have. They don't want to put weight on, so they remain in a ketogenic way of eating. There are energy benefits in being on a ketogenic diet. After you become fully adapted, actually you feel better than you have for your entire life. Your energy status is great. You feel fantastic. It's a great thing. The ketogenic diet is highly anti-inflammatory. Ketones themselves appear to be anti-inflammatory to tissues, and it's been used, of course, in cases of intractable epilepsy in children. as well. That said, the first three goals, the fat loss, maintenance of slim physique, energy benefits, and an anti-inflammatory effect, all of those are achievable on a meat and fat only diet, which is relatively high in protein, which ketogenic people absolutely go, oh no, not too much protein, gluconeogenesis will kick you out of ketosis. And you'll see people going and running to the Facebook sites and saying, will this kick me out of ketosis? Will that kick me out of ketosis? People, you are supposed to be kicked out of ketosis every time you eat. That's the point. Because your requirements nutritionally are a mixture of protein and fat, from which you will manufacture all the glucose you require. You will also use such amino acids that you take in as required for body protein maintenance, building, etc. And then what's left, any additional amino acids left over after that, and any fat molecules left around after that will be used to oxidize for energy or will be stored as fat, basically. Goal 4 on the anti-epileptic effect that hasn't been tested in fully carnivorous diets with intractable epilepsy in children. So I can't comment on that one. But all three of those things are achievable without producing a great amount of ketones at any time, without following a greatly ketogenic diet. All you're doing is alleviating the Randle cycle issue by eating protein and fat only and keeping your carbohydrate intake as close to zero as possible. So ketogenesis is not the only way to achieve 1, 2, and 3, and it's probably not the only way to achieve 4 either, but we haven't got a test for that. Okay. Next, if there are no questions.
There are no questions. We have a few people saying this for sure isn't for dummies, which I am one. I've seen a few comments. It's very scientific, and that's fine. Just ask your questions if you don't understand.
Yeah, please, look, I'm trying to make this as accessible as I can. I'm trying to use language that would relate to people without necessarily any training. If I say something that's completely over your head, ask. That's the point.
And I think also with me sharing your slides, because we couldn't get it to work that you share them, you can't really point at things showing what you're talking about in the moment, which might make it a little bit harder because I like following diagrams. Okay, where is he, etc. So just watch it again.
That's why I've been trying to be clear about where I'm looking at a graph when it's up there, so that people can. So do watch this several times, and you'll get the throw.
I'm watching at 0.5 speed, and it's still over my head.
You'll get there. Take off the blinkers. You'll get there.
Thank you very much for the Romanian pesos. Is it safe to modify your adrenaline levels with substances to get an energy boost?
No. Long term, chronically, I wouldn't be doing that at all. No.
But you're drinking coffee every day.
I'll shift the nu. Inga med kommentarer. Tack så mycket. Nästa.
What about protein releasing insulin?
Protein doesn't release insulin. Protein can cause a release of insulin. Protein is gluconeogenic.
And you might want to watch my video called something like does red meat increase or something insulin?
Oh yeah, your handle name there is a real oxymoron, isn't it?
What I'm talking about is not just insulin. You get a glucagon release as well when you're eating meat, so they kind of counteract each other, etc.
Yes.
Okay. Someone said something funny. Yes. Bank Supreme said, I think Bart explaining the science is my new fetish.
Excellent.
And yes. This is the Bart that I like. I didn't care so much about the shouty one that is swearing at vegans. I have better things to do, but this is interesting, and I like this sort of thing.
I can't say that, Teddy. That would be rude. I couldn't possibly say that. We'll keep that to ourselves, won't we, Teddy? Okay.
Probably best, yes.
Yeah, good.
Yeah, okay.
What's next?
I'm looking if there are any more questions right now. 100-minute uni lecture that equals dead feeling, 120 minutes plus Bart lecture. Yes, good.
Yes, good. And that will be 20. Thank you, Lucas. How are the pics coming?
Can you get protein poisoning from eating too much lean meat? Is protein poisoning even real?
Nope. That was easy. Absolute bollocks. complete nonsense.
Stefan says, I guess we can watch the replay. Asking too much would hinder the explanation process. Yes,
No,
but it might also help.
Yeah, it's about making sure everyone is on the same page together and we're all moving as a group so that we understand what we're saying. So I don't care how long it takes, frankly. We're nearly through the presentation anyway. So
I'm supposed to be at work soon.
yeah, that's good because we're just about done. So shall we move forward?
Yes. Okay. So next slide.
Okay, so we've talked about what the goal of ketogenic eating is. So usually it's weight loss or maintenance of slenderness, or it's energy benefits, or it's those kind of things. What is not the goal of a ketogenic way of eating? It is not to have blood or ketones in your urine constantly. The goal of ketogenesis is not to have ketones. It's a bad idea. It can affect your thyroid function if your ketones are high at all times and don't cycle on a normal daily basis like they should. Ketogenesis is a form of catabolism. You don't want to be catabolic your whole life. It's about being catabolic some of the time and anabolic the rest of the time. You need the anabolic cycling. It's about hormones. It's about your overall health. It's about your energy status across time. Catabolism ought to be balanced by periodic cyclic anabolism. And I'm talking basically daily if you're eating once a day. Your meal should kick you out of ketosis every single time. If it doesn't, your meal was deficient in protein.
Question.
Yes.
If you're eating a very high-fat ketogenic diet, you might be eating 3 meals a day or whatever, I don't care. Yes. You're not going to be in energy deficiency.
No.
Would it still be catabolic?
If you have an energy overplus, then the extra energy will be stored as fat, will be packaged up into low-density lipoproteins, and will be sent around the body for storage either in muscle cells or indeed in the adipose tissue if there's an overplus.
But you might still be in ketosis all of the time.
People are always in ketosis to some level, be that however minuscule. Ketosis never stops entirely. It's a sliding scale. It's a continuum sort of thing from almost
I'm talking more about when they're measuring and you want to see that you're in ketosis constantly and you're just going to pile the fat on so that you remain, high on the ketone breath meter or blood test or whatever you want to do.
Yeah. However, that's still not
even enough.
Yeah. Even if you do that, it's still not guaranteed that you will stay at a level of blood or urine ketones that the test will pick up and go, oh, you've got elevated ketones.
And then they eat more fat.
Well, let's get to it. Okay, so when are you anabolic? You are anabolic after you eat a mixed macro meal. And your ketogenesis is basically shut off for the several hours following that meal because of the excess energy around that stops that from happening and says, right, now it's time to store. There are 2 macros that in your diet that you can put in your diet that will lead to increased blood glucose. They are carbohydrates and protein. CHON refers to protein. Okay. If you eat once a day, and then you will spend most of that day catabolic and some of that day anabolic. And that's the normal natural design. You might miss a day here and there. You might not eat every day, let alone multiple times a day. But if you do eat multiple times a day, that will throw you into anabolism throughout most of that 24-hour period. You're going to be inflamed. You're going to be a fatty. You're going to get diabetes. You're going to get heart disease. You're going to die early. Okay. If you eat protein rather than carbohydrate, it's much better because protein doesn't cause a problem in terms of carbohydrate metabolism ongoingly. But the clearance of carbohydrates from your liver takes days and days. That's why it takes days to get into ketogenesis, because of that Randle cycle thing we spoke about earlier. Anytime your muscles, for example, use glucose for energy, there will be a spillage of lactate into the blood. some of that lactate will traverse through the blood and go back to the liver, where it will encourage gluconeogenesis in the liver. Anytime there's glucose in the liver, that will downregulate the rate of beta-oxidation ketone production. Okay, so that's that one.
So what do you say to those people that, like I spoke to Sarah the other week, you probably saw the interview, and she didn't do that well on just ribeyes, and she needed to start eating more fat, and she's getting coaching with Stephanie, who's proposing at least 200 grams of fat for everyone every day to get properly into ketosis. What do you say about that?
I agree. I think that people need to keep their fat up. I think that whatever I'm not saying don't keep your fat up, what I'm also saying is keep your protein up as well.
Right.
Keep your protein up to the level you need it to be. Cool. Next slide if there are any questions.
Yep. Okay, let's do the next slide and then we do the questions.
Yeah.
Ta-da.
Okay. So another point about testing your ketones in either your blood or your urine. Take this hypothetical situation here. I eat one meal a day, fully keto. I have my meal in the middle of the afternoon. I spend the rest of that day without food intake. I don't have supper or anything like that. I go to sleep. I wake up in the morning. I would probably have ketones in my blood and in my urine at that point. But let's say I get up after the morning phenomenon, which has already knocked my level of ketones down by producing a bolus of the AM effect glucose, and then I go to the gym. I'm off to the gym now. Wouldn't that be nice if we could go to a gym? That'd be awesome. Anyway, and then you do all this exercise for however long you're at the gym. And what happens to the ketones in your blood when you've gone to the gym? Well, the beta-hydroxybutyrate down the bottom here in the blood, where it says MCT, and then above that there's an acetoacetate. They are both diffusing from the blood into the muscle cells during exercise, and then they're going through OXCT up to acetyl coenzyme I, and then to acetyl coenzyme A, and then through the tricarboxylic acid TCA cycle on the right-hand side there. In other words, the ketones that you've produced are being used. They're being fully oxidized to H2O plus CO2. Those ketones will not be red in your blood, and they will not be red in your urine because they won't pass to your urine because they will have been oxidized by the muscle cells. So you'll get all discouraged and say, I've eaten a fully ketogenic, I did nothing wrong, I did it right. I went to the gym to use extra energy to help me with my fat loss, and then I came home and tested my ketones and there were none. I'm so sad, I'm so pissed off because my goal was to produce ketones, wasn't it? No, you clown. Your goal was to use the fat stored on your body for energy so it's not stored on your body anymore, not to produce jolly ketones. The ketones have been used for their purpose. You did it wrong. That's why you should stop obsessing with the ketone meter. Throw the bloody thing in the bin. Don't worry about testing the ketones in your blood. They're not a reliable or valid indication that you are in ketosis or that you are not. If you eat one meal a day, and that one meal consists of meat and associated animal fat, potentially with a very small amount of carbohydrate as well if you're into that, then you will be in ketosis the vast majority of any 24-hour period if you're eating once a day. You do not need a meter. You do not need keto sticks. You do not need to obsess over ketos. And you do not run to every Facebook group in existence and write, why are my ketones zero? I've been doing keto for months and they're zero. Ah. Okay, I'm finished. That's my presentation on ketos and testing ketones and stuff. Are there questions before we finish off? We've got about 10 minutes, haven't we, before you have to run and I have to run to get ready for my live stream.
Sure. So Itchy says, can't afford super chats right now, broke from chickens and paraphernalia. What's that?
Paraphernalia. That's all the other bullshit associated with them. You know, like aquarium paraphernalia. All the
Sorry,
bullshit.
but I think I can swing a membership. I'll look into that. Thank you both. Well, thank you, Itchy. That's very kind and generous of you. I don't want anyone to go on their bare knees just to buy, a membership or whatever.
Yeah,
but if you can afford it, it's very appreciated.
Absolutely.
And she also said, and Bart, I missed your Patreon channel too. It's a membership thing now. I will look into that as well.
Awesome.
Cool.
Yep.
Okay.
We understand that times are tough for people. You do need to look after yourselves first. But if you do have some spare dollars, do spare some love for us YouTube creators that are struggling away against the machinations of the evil artificial intelligence that wants to keep us subdued.
Catabolism is repair and anabolism is tearing down, right? No, other way around.
Catabolism tearing down, anabolism breaking up, yes. Whatever
breaking up.
Yes.
Building up.
Building up, breaking down.
Don't make it more complicated. So then what's your take on paleomedicina, paleo keto, where it's 80-20 fat protein every day and helps people heal a wide variety of illnesses?
80-20 fat to protein is fine so long as that is your sweet spot and works well for you as an individual. I usually start around 75-25 calorically, which is 50-50 volume-wise for protein and fat. To be honest, I probably don't quite get there because I still do eat probably too much protein and probably not quite enough fat myself. But that's the goal.
Can a carnivore diet reverse damage from heart attacks?
There's no experimental evidence to support that claim. However, hypothetically, given what we understand about how the human body operates and heals and works, the answer would be absolutely, of course. It can be associated with assisting the body to do the things it needs to do to heal. Yeah.
So ketosis is just a part of metabolism daily, but including constant ketosis states is not an ideal goal.
Spot on. You got it, Itchy.
So yeah, I think you mentioned that you need to differentiate between what you see in the blood and what you actually are, because you have a metabolism that is adapted to getting you into ketosis really quickly, but anytime you eat, you're getting out, etc. And that's what you want to do. You want to have a very well functioning, flexible keto metabolism.
Harry is late.
Slightly.
We're just winding up, Harry. We're just about finished. Where have you been, son? It's been great. We've been talking about ketogenesis and shit.
Yeah. I'm gonna have Harry on my channel in 1.5 weeks.
Awesome.
So wait for that video.
Right.
Okay. Let's see.
Special guest appearance by Yellow Ted in that one, isn't there?
I put you guys on my TV. Everyone is huge. Awesome. I think that was all the questions. So if we don't have any more questions, or if you do have any, get them in right now. Otherwise, we are going to wrap up here.
Excellent.
Sorry, went shopping so a little late also. Awesome slides that we'll rewatch later. Yeah, you will have to rewatch if you want to see anything.
You will have to watch it several times, I imagine. Yeah, I mean, it took me 20 years to study this shit to get my head around it, so I don't expect you to get it in one hearing. So do watch it again and again and again and then again.
I mean, even for me, I kind of know this stuff, but when you're talking, I'm like, might have to look again. So don't think that you're stupid if you don't get it. It's very abstract when you just have something on the screen and you're trying to kind of follow. Yes.
All right.
Me and Harry will be talking about, well, mostly Harry, to be fair. I'm not talking so much about the history of...
That's how it goes, isn't it?
of the craziness with the nutritional guidelines, etc.
Oh, excellent. Yes.
Thomas, thank you both so much for a wonderful presentation. You're more than welcome. Here we have a real question. Paleomedicina is every day. Would I ever go out of ketosis?
Yes.
Yeah, when you eat.
Every time you eat. So long as your protein is, slightly more than what you absolutely need. Yep.
Bo says, yes, thanks, Pim and Bart. Also have to rewatch. Daniel will be watching this heaps.
Awesome.
Top 10 most anticipated anime crossovers. Pim and Harry. What? Right, so I think that's it then. And I'm going to be at work in time. Holy shit. So thank you so much for watching. Thank you, Mr. Nutritional Sciences Watchdog person, for doing that. That's what I think you do best on YouTube, but that's just my opinion. I know not all of your followers actually agree, and that's fine. And as we said, if you want, I do have memberships on the channel now, so if you want to support the channel, you can become a member. And in 10 minutes, Bart will be live on his channel. And after that, we have the Sleepy Harry here. He will also be streaming later live on his channel. So if you are bored on a Saturday evening or Sunday morning, whatever it is where you are, you know what to do. Any final words?
Not from me. I think we've covered it. Thank you for having me on. It's been a pleasure. Don't forget to tune in 9 minutes or so for my live stream.
Thank you very much.
Right.
Bye.
Right.